Chapter 1. A disturbing sensation crept over Adrianne. Snuggling close to Wilder, her head lying on his amazing wide warm chest, holding onto his large muscular arms, pulling them close, she lay in the shelter of his love. Feeling secure, Adrianne let out a satisfied breath. Her restless body moved around, tugging his arms for reassurance. Wilder responded to her by holding her tight. His passionate body merged into hers, carrying warmth and security to her body. The nightmare is over, she thought, but what could be wrong? She was wrapped securely in Wilder's arms, but her mind was a hostage of Bane, even as she slept under Wilder's protection. Her subconscious signaled to her that something was dreadfully wrong. She thought she heard her children calling out her name in her sleep. It sounds like Hunter, her mind said. A mother would know her children's voices and cries. It was Hunter, not Devon. She moved closer to Wilder, trying to get the reassurance of his body that she and her children were safe, and it was only a dream occupying her unconscious mind. Adrianne's agitated movements on Wilder's body didn't wake him, and Adrianne couldn't wake herself from her nightmarish dream. The moonlight flowed through the curtains as Wilder held Adrianne tight in his arms, falling into a deep sleep. It had been a week since he had last slept. Over a week since he had slept soundly. He had been tortured by the thought of what Bane had done to Adrianne. It had taken Wilder too long to reach her. Feeling the warmth of her body caused Wilder to relax. She was near, and he was aware that she was safe in his arms. There was no reason for him to fear anything. He had finally rescued Adrianne from Bane, and she and Wilder were far away, hidden into the interior of the dense forest of Nevada. With Wilder's head lowered to her hair, he sniffed nothing but Adrianne's scent, drowning out the odor of wild animals and the tall pine trees twisting in the wind. He smelled the fragrance of her skin. The aroma of fresh flowers found in the meadow of his ranch, but now found in the soap she used to clean her body, before and after they made love. Her scent reminded him of when he was a child, and his mother would bring fresh roses cut from her gardens into their home. He remembered when he first learned that the beautiful roses had thorns, a lesson taught to him by the beautiful roses, and his beautiful mate. Wilder didn't see, hear, or smell anything unfamiliar when the moonlight cast a shadow on Bane skulking into the house, and standing over him at the foot of his bed. Bane watched Adrianne as she embraced Wilder. Bane watched her lying naked on Wilder's chest, their bodies as one. Adrianne thrashed about, pulling and tugging at Wilder, not knowing why she felt so uncomfortable, but Wilder just held her close and never opened his eyes. Exhaustion from the hunt for her and Bane, and worrying about Lycell and Drayton, had consumed all his energy, and when he needed it the most, he couldn't gather it to save his life. Bane stood silent and motionless, trying to decide what to do next. Before he met Adrianne, he would have killed Wilder as he slept, made Adrianne pregnant with his pups, used her up, and given her to the betas to do as they pleased, but he had changed. It was Adrianne who had changed him. He knew if he slayed Wilder in front of her, he could never have her the way he wanted. So Bane stood at the foot of their bed, holding his breath, watching them with the pain of a jealous lover. He wanted to rip Adrianne from Wilder's arms, but he would have to kill him first. That would have been the easiest thing to do. Yet he stood over them, thinking about the consequences of his actions. He could have killed them both if it wasn't for his desire to have Adrianne. He decided that he would wait. Furthermore, killing Wilder as he slept wasn't good sport. It was like hunting a sick animal. There was no pleasure in combat with a tired, exhausted Wilder. Bane had his own timeline and plans for him, where Adrianne would witness Wilder's slaughter, and see that Bane was the strongest and the more acceptable werewolf for a mate. He thought like a werewolf and not a man. Bane had to admit to himself that he had fallen in love with Adrianne. He had never been in love, especially with a human. He looked on them as a necessary distraction when he became tired of war-females. Then he would travel to a nearby town and pick out a willing human female who enjoyed being fucked when he was in werewolf form. She would know the score, and she was willing to take his large cock as he took her the way he wanted, down on all fours. However, now, he wanted something more from this human female lying on the bed. He wanted a family like the Samsas, and he wanted it with Adrianne. To slaughter Wilder with her looking on, he could never have Adrianne the way he desired, having his pups and loving him. This was a dream for a man, was his first thought. Now he wanted to embrace that part of himself, but Bane was a werewolf, a shifter, and no matter how much he wanted to be a man, his wild nature would call to him. He didn't realize this when he thought like a man. Bane blinked his eyes and snorted, then turned slowly, patiently, and crept out of the door he came in. When he had gone, cold air whooshed over Adrianne, and she heard the cry of her young pups. The pups she had given birth to by Lycell. They had a distinct sound to their voices. It wasn't the voice of Hunter or Devon this time. These were young voices crying for their mother. Adrianne sat straight up, gazing around, regarding everything in the sparse room, her eyes blinking wildly, waiting for them to focus. She felt a presence, and then she felt the absence of something or someone. Glancing over at Wilder, who was still asleep, she became concerned. She had never known him to sleep so hard. It wasn't in his nature to sleep like that. At first she thought that he might be dead. Panic showed in her eyes. She looked at her hands and saw they were shaking. She managed to touch him lightly, checking him for signs of life. There wasn't any blood. He wasn't wounded. He's warm, she thought, but he still didn't move. She watched him, waiting for movement. A few seconds passed and still nothing. Usually, if she was having a bad dream and had been agitated, he would wake, but this time he didn't. She poked at his arm with her finger, and nothing happened. Hysterically, Adrianne pushed him and jerked his arm, and still he didn't move. She panicked, pushing him with both hands. She let out the loudest yell she could gather deep in her chest. "Wilder! Wilder! Wake up, Wilder," she said, pushing and prodding him, until he turned to face her. His blue eyes opened wide, fixed on her, as if he was seeing her for the first time. Wilder had to get control of his body. It was unusual for him to wake in such a panic and not be ready to fight and defend, especially with a known enemy prowling somewhere. Wilder recognized his limitation, especially now. He had allowed himself to become fatigued and dog-tired, where he was unable to defend Adrianne and himself if he had to. "What is it, Adrianne?" he said, sitting up calmly, not displaying his anxiety and disappointment with himself for falling into a hibernating sleep. He reached for her and brought her down to his chest and wrapped his arms around her. "What's the matter now? Are you sick or hungry?" His voice showed concern and patience. "I'm neither. Don't you smell something? It's a musk odor, not like yours. It's as if someone has been in this room." She moved away from him, meeting his eyes. Wilder's eyes quickly scanned the room. He lifted his nose, taking in the odor of the room, as if he was following an animal's scent. He sprang to his feet away from the cloak of Adrianne's scent. How could that smell have escaped him? He tilted his head and jumped to the floor, away from the bed, his eyes darting around the room searching for threats. "We have to go now, Adrianne." "You're in danger," Wilder said, his voice composed but filled with urgency. "Why, what's wrong?" "That scent you smelled is Bane." Wilder reached for his clothes and pulled up his jeans. "I have to take a bath first." That couldn't be Bane. He must be hundreds of miles away. She glanced at Wilder for affirmation. "If Bane is traveling as a werewolf, and I suspect he is, then he was here. This doesn't make sense. If he was here, why? Why didn't he kill me?" Wilder questioned. The answer came back. Because it wasn't good sport. With werewolves, it was the hunt that mattered. He hunted us and found us. Very few werewolves would have been able to do that. "But he could have killed both of us if he had wanted," Adrianne said, looking around. "He didn't want to kill both of us. Only me. He wouldn't do it, because you would see him for what he is. And if you saw him kill me in my sleep, he knew that he would never have you completely. He would have to defeat me first in front of you to prove himself to be the better werewolf. It's not just you he would have to defeat, and I would never go with him willingly, Adrianne said, holding on to Wilder. Maybe he doesn't know that, Wilder said, his eyes locking with hers. He spared me because I said I was pregnant. Wilder tilted his head. Could it be that the werewolf he knew had changed? Adrianne had changed him and Lycell, and it wasn't inconceivable to think that she wouldn't be able to do the same with Bane. This werewolf is not the one I know. I think it had to do with not knowing about Lycell and Drayton. If he thought that they might be dead, he would have killed me on the spot and taken you with him. But he didn't know how far away they were. He must have thought that they would have come after you if he attempted anything this soon. Get ready, Adrianne, we have to leave here now. I have to leave my home away from home on account of Bane? I was just getting used to the solitude. Can we come back? No, and a shower is out of the question. I want to keep my scent on you. Adrianne reached for her bra on the chair. Wilder buttoned his flannel shirt. Hurry. You don't know him, and I wish you would listen to me. Adrianne climbed out of the bed and walked over to Wilder. She looked up at him into his deep dark blue eyes and held his face in her small hands. I'm listening to you. Her hands caressed his shoulders and slid down to his wrists, then to his wide muscular chest. I'm in the mood for more of the same from last night. We can't. We have to go. If he gets to the ranch before we do, then he will discover that Lycell and Drayton had been hurt. He could do something to cause harm to Lycell's pups. They don't know he's stalking. It is presumed that I killed Bane, and I would have if it wasn't for you. Wilder's voice was accusatory. Adrianne pulled away. Now you want to blame me. I thought we had settled that last night. Are you ever going to let me live this down? She turned away from Wilder. He wanted to tell her he was sorry, but now wasn't the time. For some reason he was still angry, but he knew it wasn't Adrianne's fault, and it was hard for him to constantly say he was sorry, even when he was wrong. Grabbing his keys and cell phone, he walked away. He stopped at the door and said, I'll get you something to eat. Now get dressed, you can eat in the car. There's one thing that irks me about you, Wilder, Adrianne screamed. You're too domineering, and you never can admit when you're wrong. And you're too stubborn and want your way. I've changed. I hope you have too, she said softly, walking behind him and standing in the doorway to the kitchen. I'm trying, Adrianne, but you're making it difficult for me. He turned, watching her with narrow eyes. Adrianne was pissed with Wilder again. Then try a little harder, because you're not the only werewolf in town. Wilder turned facing her with a hard look. His eyes were tight and his mouth was set in a hard line. He moved near her as if he was stalking his prey. When he locked eyes with Adrianne, he grabbed her in his arms. She felt the rise of his large cock pressing against her body, and the flicker in his piercing blue eyes penetrating her soul. That may be so, but I'm the only one that has you now. If I wanted, I could take you and make you do what I want, and you wouldn't say a word. You would never be the same. You wouldn't dare, she said, stepping back. If I wanted, I could have. She stopped. Her next words would have sent Wilder over the edge, and she didn't want to risk bringing a gulf between them. And you wouldn't be the same, she said, countering him and not letting him have the last word, which was what she did, and that made Wilder attracted to her. Her strength was also her weakness. That of talking too much and being so stubborn. Wilder stepped closer to Adrianne with a serious look. Say that one more time and you will see the werewolf come out, like you have never seen before. Since I'm not interested in seeing that other side of you, I won't say that again. He took her hand and then picked up 2 containers of cooked and fresh meat, and led her out the door. Put on your coat. She hurried and did as he had asked, and he led her to the garage. "What about the truck?" Adrianne questioned. "It's not mine, it belongs to Bane, and it's almost played out. He will probably take it once we've gone. We're driving your Jeep." Wilder pulled the keys out of his pants pocket. "I bought it for you." "I have a Jeep?" "I alone bought it for you. I had it modified for your protection with bulletproof glass. I knew you wouldn't want us to accompany you everywhere you went, so I bought this for your birthday. It was supposed to be a secret. Just like this cabin was to be a secret. Now I have to sell it. I can't risk Bane finding us again." Wilder opened the door to the Jeep and helped her in. He walked around and climbed in, hit the keyless ignition, raised the garage door, and backed out. They were going home, and Adrianne was glad. She had to make sure her children were safe. Deep down, she thought Bane wouldn't hurt her pups. She'd had enough of an adventure to last a lifetime. She wished she would never see Bane again, but she harbored mixed feelings of one day meeting him under different circumstances, if only to ask him to forget her and leave her family alone. Maybe she could reason with him so they both could have peace, and she could be with her children and husbands, and he could live out his life under his own terms in Alaska. Surely he doesn't want a woman like me, she thought. He was wasting his life concentrating on a human who had too many children, and too many werewolves who loved her, and was willing to destroy him. She would plead with him for his sake to leave her alone. Adrianne was under the assumption she could reason with Bane. If he loved her like she suspected he did, then he would find it in his heart to find love somewhere else. She would remember him and think about him, but she couldn't be with him. It was over, and she was going home to her family, and they should forget each other, and for him to stop wanting something that could never be. Bane wasn't thinking with his human brain. He was thinking with his werewolf brain. His desire for Adrianne had been raised to a level where he couldn't turn away from her, and what she represented to him, even if he wanted to. He had to go after her and have her in his life, but first he had to get rid of all obstacles that lay in his way. They were her werewolf mates and her yearlings. He had changed, but there were some things that remained unchanged. Bane was plagued with blind rage, blind passion, and that made him dangerous to anyone he came into contact with.